6:30. Oh, I guess I could have used the real thing here, huh? Anyway, meeting called to order. Roll call.
Bender,
Here.
Ermeling,
Here.
Manel,
Here.
Oldenburg is not here, and he let me know, and then other position is vacant.
Okay. Approval of minutes of the previous meeting, October 18th, 2021.
Also move.
Moved by Bender,
Second.
second by Manel. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, so carried. Public comments? Is there anyone on Zoom?
Nope.
Okay. By phone?
Think so.
Gotta get all these down here. Okay, acknowledge work products transmittal, October budget status report.
Catch the summary with the October status. Things are looking good. I have the summaries below. Is there any questions on any of that?
Any questions? Comments? Good work. Good. Educational presentations, 2021 audit presentation by Kerber Ross.
Rose.
I'm sorry, yes.
No, that's all right. I guess that's me. Ooh, I'll try not to trip on my way up. You said it was gonna be educational? Wow, that's a lot of pressure now for me. I probably don't need that. So I prepared just a really simple PowerPoint presentation for you all. Of course, the nice booklet that you want to read is the audit report itself. But there's a lot of pages here, so I thought maybe that summarizing it would assist.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I absolutely will, yep. So my name is Christina Dahmer. I'm a CPA with Kerber Rose. I have over 18 years of experience working with governments, doing all sorts of things, consulting, et cetera, as well as doing audits. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm your new auditor. You switched firms, and I really enjoyed working with the village this year. I just want to give you just a quick overview of what the audit process is. And of course, the culmination of it is this lovely report that is prepared by the finance department of the village and that the village and the board take responsibility for. The audit is a financial statement audit, and the purpose of it is to compile the report and then give an opinion on the line items that are contained within the financial statements, as well as the disclosures stating that they are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So as a result, my claim to fame, if you would go to the first slide, is the unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is what you want. It's basically a clean opinion. And that is what your audit report states in your financial statements. So that's my portion of it. In order to get that opinion, we come out and do some testing, and that is analytical and substantive in nature. So what we do is we walk through all of the internal controls that the village has, and a lot of those are written down, and then we will actually test a few transactions to see if they are appropriately functioning. We also then do some substantive testing, just preliminarily to get an idea of the balances, and that results in what's called a risk assessment for the audit. And that risk assessment then is what we build the testing on. So how thorough or general or analytical it is depends on what we find in those reviews of the internal controls. And of course, there is a summary in a management letter and board communication that is provided with the audit report that then summarizes our conclusions related to your internal control processes. And we didn't have any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. Of course, you present and prepare your own financial statements, which is not the normal thing for government of your size in Wisconsin. So I really commend the finance department for having the in-house experience and knowledge to be able to do that. That is a part of your internal control framework. So that's why you don't have either a material weakness or a significant deficiency related to that. The other item that's normally noted in many audits for governments of your size and in this area is going to be a segregation of duties comment. And you also don't have that. And I just want to point it out because that just means you have enough people at the table doing all of the finance work in your finance department. So that is a good place to be. And the only item that we mentioned was related to cash, which because of your late advance tax collections in December, sometimes there's extra balances hanging around at your banks. And so they're not fully collateralized. But again, most of that money just goes right back to the pockets of the other taxing bodies that you're collecting it for, like the county and the school districts, et cetera.
We had a huge debt issue that year and 3 debt issues, 4.
Yep.
So
And
that contributed to
we'll
the
show
very
that.
large
Yes,
balance.
that's true. I forgot about that. So that's why it ended up being so big. So that's not going to occur again. And of course, the banks can't just scramble and cover all of those balances with collateral and get those securities that close to year end. So that was really the only item that we noted. So that means that we found your internal controls to be functioning as they should be. And if you would go to the next slide. I wanted to show you just some trend data. This one shows you the fund balance of the general fund. And of course, that's your primary operating fund. And it supports the majority of your day-to-day services. The general fund realized a fund balance increase of $170,000 approximately from 2020. Fund balance at year end totaled $3.5 million, of which $629,000 is non-spendable, $145,850 is assigned, and $2.7 million is unassigned. So of the $629,000 that's non-spendable, $520,000 of that approximately is due from the safer district. And then the balance of the rest is prepaid items that's non-spendable. So the target here that you want to look at is where is your fund balance going? And if you look all the way back to 2016, you can see that it kind of dipped and then it went back up. And in 2020, you ended up with a pretty nice, sizable unassigned fund balance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we continue on in the presentation, if you wouldn't mind progressing the slides. Thank you. And then the capital improvements fund, we also wanted to show. So because you had this debt issuance for some amazing projects that are probably already occurring this year, maybe even coming to conclusion, that's why you've got that an increase in restricted fund balance for 2020. And otherwise, you can see that just going back to 2016, there wasn't a ton of capital project activity until it's kind of picking up here in the most recent years. I'm assuming that's due to the extreme growth that you're experiencing, and there's lots of things to do. So that's related to the debt issuance that you had. You've got some money set aside at the end of 2020 in order to facilitate those projects. So if you would, thank you. So then the fund balance for the general fund, as you can see, you do have a policy to keep that fund balance right in between the sweet spot. Officially, your policy reads that you would like to keep the unassigned general fund balance equivalent to between 2 to 4 months of the ensuing year's budgeted general fund expenditures. So about 16.67% to 33.33%, or a third. So as you will see, the village has surpassed the top level target in 2020, and with additional funding coming from ARPA, you've got a lot of planning and decision making. But of course, as you're doing that, make sure that you're leaving enough in reserves. As you might understand, we have a very unusual environment going on right now in our markets and of course in our economy. So there's really no way to tell what's going to happen to us for sure in the next few years with inflation and all of these items. So I have been recommending to my clients to try to stay closer to that top range for your fund balance so that you're able to weather the worst storms that could be coming our way. When the last financial situation occurred in about 2009, when that crash was going on, At that time, I was working with the National Government Finance Officers Association, and I did a bunch of research about how that went with different governments. And the governments in the state of Texas did the best weathering the storm of 2009. And the reason being was they had a lot of fund balance that was saved up prior to that. So that careful financial planning helped them maintain their strategic direction, even though the financial revenues were not coming in as they had originally intended. So I just wanted to add that caution because I know you have a lot of money to spend, and I hear that everywhere, board meetings, everyone's super excited about these funds and how they can creatively spend them, of course, but you still want to make sure that you can weather the storms ahead, and they might be different than the expenses you've been used to paying. So using your prior expenses as the target is really not the only thing that you should consider. The next slide, please, just shows you your business type activities, your utilities that you have there, water, sewer, and stormwater, and all together they are your business type activities. So on your government-wide financial statements, we take those funds, which are close to cash basis, and we true them up to a full accrual basis. So you can see how well you're covering the costs of each of those activities. And we just compare to the prior year so far, but as we continue to be your auditors, you will start to see this graph kind of form out. But that blue line is all of the activities together. So this presentation can show you which activity is doing better than the others and which one maybe is not pulling its own weight. As a result, you can see that what we'll talk about next, the water utility is kind of doing the best, but then sewer and stormwater are just kind of breaking even. So on the next slide, you can see we presented the water utility rate of return, and this has been fluctuating just slightly over the past 3 years. And there was an increase from 2.5% in 2019 to 2.9% in 2020. And the rate of return has been steadily increasing, but it is still below the amount approved by the PSC. So if you have more revenues there with lower expenditures or expenses, you'll still be able to have a slightly higher rate of return, which was approved September 1st, 2018, not to exceed 4% for the utility of the village. So you got a little bit of a ways to go there from 2.9 to 4, so you don't have any concerns there. And also you're not, lower than you need to be either. So just right where you want to be. And then the next slide talks about this debt issue. That yes, it was a very large one, and you can see again we're just comparing from the prior year to the current year. The village borrowed about 15 million for capital projects and equipment in 2020, and about 8.9 million of that was unspent as of December 31st, 2020. So that's why we saw that restricted fund balance in the capital improvement fund. The total outstanding general obligation debt as of December 31st, 2020 was $14,867,000 approximately. In addition, the village did have revenue debt outstanding, and revenue debt means that your bonds are backed by revenues generated from Weston water, sewer, and stormwater utilities, and that revenue backed debt was $8.3 million approximately. The Weston Community Development Authority also had some revenue debt outstanding, and that was 16.5 million. There were some capital lease obligations as well, just about $139,000. And so therefore the total outstanding debt is $39,897,000 approximately. Now that sounds like a lot, but of course there is a benchmark for you, and that is the state statute limit from the state that's based on your equalized valuation of $1.3 billion. And so your statutory debt limit is $67,246,000. So what you have, you're basically at 22% of your legal debt margin. So that's not very high at all. That does give you some wiggle room. So, one of the things that happened after that last crisis in 2009 I was at that time working in Illinois. And because the assessed valuations came down, there were a lot of villages and school districts especially that ended up being upside down with the state amount allowed for debt. And they're starting to now come back from that. So obviously that is a risk, but because you're only at 22%, I wouldn't be concerned with that at all. So I know there's been, some talk of that in Wisconsin because we've seen that our property values just skyrocket through the roof. And boy, everybody knows they're going to come back down. So, if you're kind of thinking, well, wow, should we be paying down our debt? I think you are in a good spot with that. And remember, the reason for it is because you are growing the village and you're adding additional things to the village and because of the necessity of the growth. So this is exactly what you're supposed to do with debt. It's supposed to help finance long-term benefits to the village. Again, in 2020, as she mentioned, the village issued $5.34 million in general obligation bonds with $3.1 million for street projects, some $1.3 million for sewer, and $0.89 million for stormwater projects. So there's a lot of additional extra capital assets that you'll record once those are built, which will add to your net position and overall value as a village itself. Okay, so no concerns there. I just know they're very big numbers. So, and another indicator is this next slide where you can see that the debt service payments as a percentage of non-capital expenditures is increasing, which means that you are increasing how much debt you are paying, right, in your expenditures because you have the greater amount of debt. So again, this is just something we want to keep an eye on as we see how your debt increases or decreases. How are you paying it off? Some boards will get to the point where they want to pay down their debt. So you can see that in these graphs. I think seeing the trends and knowing where you want to go is going to kind of help you get there if you look at your trend information over the past few years. Again, debt service at healthy levels is not necessarily a negative occurrence. The next slide just is for us, for the audit. We do have a new standard that we're going to implement next year with the finance department, and we'll give you some tools on this. We're actually preparing a presentation for the Wisconsin GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, for the conference in December. So we're going to have some resources related to this. But if you have significant operating leases like copiers and things like that in the past, you would just record when you paid for those leases. But now it's going to be a balance sheet item that we have to bring on, and it just gets offset. So your equity doesn't get changed or affected, but your balance sheet's going to look a little different. We're going to have more disclosures, just more fun for us accountants to have. But that's about it.
Who's demanding that, or who's instituting that?
That is from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board as a new standard that's promulgated for state and local governments to implement.
Okay.
And then my final slide here, my final couple slides, I forgot about ARPA. My slide here is just something that I'm trying to get out there so that people can be more knowledgeable about, again, how auditors fit into your risk assessment process, because of course we come once a year, maybe twice a year. We don't talk to you and we're not around all year round. So it's really your job to keep an eye on your internal control framework, make sure that the tone at the top, that the board is setting a good example, that management is setting a good example. And I recommend that at least once a year, you sit down and you have a discussion about how things are going, review your internal control processes, and think about ways to improve them. So this is just a reminder that that should be part of your regular management of the village as well. And then the final slide is about ARPA, the real exciting stuff. So, I looked some information up on the sites that are out there from the Department of Revenue. And if you want to look it up yourself, you're more than welcome to. I'm just showing how much was allocated to you. And again, you have, some planning to do around this, but make sure that you consider how much you want to kind of keep in your back pocket for a rainy day as well, okay? There's some generic information there about what they recommend for the period of performance. So you actually have through December 31st, 2024 to come up with a plan to spend the money. And then each year you're going to calculate, there's a spreadsheet that finance will prepare for the revenue loss. And that's something you monitor each year. So the amount that you lose in revenue, is right now kind of connected to what you'd be utilizing from the grant proceeds. And then, of course, any other kind of improvements or things related to COVID that you might want to tackle. We've seen a lot of examples of this, so we'll just work together to make sure that everything is accurately done or done in accordance with the laws. But right now, it's pretty open-ended. So I think as more information comes out, we'll know more about this. Their focus at the treasury level is, of course, the larger governments like yourselves that got the bigger allocation. So I think we'll get more information for you guys earlier on in the process. And then, of course, as your expenditures extend past the $750,000, that means that you will need to get a single audit. And being that we are a large enough firm to do that and we get a peer review, we actually just kicked out our peer reviewers the other day. That means that we can easily take care of that single audit for you when the time comes for the next few years. So nothing to worry about there.
How safe is that allocation? It's not here, right?
We got half,
Half of us.
We do have it.
Yeah.
So we have it in a
remember
local,
we got it in May.
Right.
okay, well, I
So
didn't.
you get two.
I didn't know if that was an allocation. We physically have
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yep, they give you the money first.
Okay, I'm happy.
Yes,
Awesome.
yes.
I don't know. I mean, if we have until, 24 and then
Yep.
something happens and it gets pulled back, so
They just haven't given you examples of how to use it now.
that's, but it's sitting there earning nothing but something. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
That's it. So when are we gonna get the next hit? In 22?
February.
Or is it
Really?
in May again?
What?
It's next year.
Yeah, it will be in 2022. I don't recall, and I don't think I copied that into this slide, when they were gonna, but I, March or April or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got half of it and not, then you'll get the other half, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all yours until you
Right.
plan to spend it properly in accordance with their
We've
provisions.
got two very good planners.
Yes, I agree. Yes, well, and all of this has to be requested on the federal treasury website because you got a bigger allocation.
Yeah.
So, there will be more information there, I believe. And of course, we have lots of support. We have the National GFOA, who I used to work for, so I'm gonna reach out to them and try to get more information. And then, of course, I think auditors are gonna have to kind of get together and figure out where we're gonna stand on this as well. But, the previous monies that came were pretty open-ended. The intent of this is to rebuild and then, get better. So I don't think they were just intending to plug the gap of what we lost. They're, the presentations that I've seen directly from the United States Treasury at conferences really stresses that the intent was to build back even better and bigger and greater. So obviously today we had another, the Infrastructure Act got signed into law by the president as well. So it's clear that they're throwing a lot of money this way, kind of similar to the last time, right? So we've seen this already, but I just think it's unusual, the scenario we're in economically. So it's harder to tell what's going to happen in our future financially as a country. So that's why I urge you to be careful in the spending, spend it, but keep a nice nest egg for yourself so that you can weather the storms. So that's it. My last slide is just my information. Again, this is a wonderful report. They did an amazing job, and the audit process itself, we did we did it all virtually and we were able to communicate via Teams. And so we did extensive fraud interviews with a lot of employees and talked to many folks that work at the village, as well as did all of our, walkthroughs and discussions like that. And then I just want to point out that if you do have a citizen that would like to get more information, or maybe you want to get more information, there's a really lovely management discussion and analysis with charts and graphs that the finance department has prepared and done a really great job of showing you what happened from the prior year to the current year. So I always point people to that because the rest of it is so very technical and difficult to go through. Unless, of course, you have trouble falling asleep, then I really recommend this book. That's all I've got for you. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions or concerns or? I just want to thank our staff for doing a great job.
We do.
We're very lucky to have them.
I agree. I'm lucky to work with them in the village, so appreciate your time and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, item number 7, 2022 budget.
Okay, so we're gonna go through our quick budget presentation. This will be the same one at the board level, but because we have different people here, we thought we'd also go through it for this level. Okay. Outline, we're gonna go through the public hearing notice, the general fund, and then all other funds. Introduction. So the budget process starts in September, sometimes earlier. And then what we do is we send out the Excel spreadsheets to the department heads, and they work with staff to provide estimates, current year estimates, and next year budgets, and then future year plans. Finance staff prepares the wages and benefits for all areas, and all that information is combined and presented to you guys at the joint meetings. What you see in front of you is the public hearing notice, which was published in the paper. It shows that we have a 2.99% increase. Total expenditure and revenue budget is $8,187,241. Below you can see that is a summary of our levy. So in the end, our total TID-in levy is $8,824,393. Of that, 5.1 million is for our operating levy, 1.4 is for debt service, and then 133,000 gets split between our CIP and Aquatic Center. And so CIP gets 93,000 and Aquatic Center gets 40. Weird thing this year, our assessed value actually dropped. We talked about it last time, which we went from $907 million to $899 million. And the most we can figure out is that it has to do with the TIF, because if you look at the TIFs, we went from 258 million to 270 million. So the jump there of 12 million took away some value out of our TIF out. That's what we can figure out. The assessed value TID-in, that is a bottom number that is figured out with what Greg submits to the state. And then what we have to do is take the equalized value of our TIF districts, multiply by the assessment ratio, which was 0.83, and that is how we got our TID assessed value. So to get our TID out, what we do is take the total assessed value minus the TID out, or the TID value, and then we get the TID out value. So it's just a process of elimination, and our assessed value dropped.
It's weird.
Yeah, I know. So assessed tax rate that our taxpayers are gonna see on their tax bill from the Village of Weston is $7.54. It's a 4% increase over last year's rate. You can see the trends that we had. And then down below, you'll see the summary for all the funds. Oops, sorry.
Oh,
There you go.
okay, sorry.
On the bottom of the sheet is all other funds summary. So the total expenditures for the Village of Weston is, where is it? Operating levy, this expenditures, 33,723,714. So those are all our funds, the expenditures for all our funds. Okay. Okay, this is a nice summary graph of our tax rate. We're looking at increase of 29 cents over last year. Next. This shows it a little bit differently. This also includes the school district, tech, and the county. So we're looking at a total net rate of $24.13, which is 57 cents over last year, approximately a 2.4% increase. This is all estimated yet because the state's not going to come out with our school credit until at the end of the week. So we estimate same as last year as $1.52. So what happens was we get all these values, everyone levies, and then we get a tax rate. So the tax rate of $25.65. And then the state comes out with the credit for the school tax credit. And then we get the net rate of $24.13. This is the general fund summary. It's similar to the public hearing notice which we presented. Shows an increase of 2.99% of both our revenues and our expenditures. Go. Similar to what we've seen for the last couple of meetings, this shows where all the changes are in our expenditures, and it shows the assumptions that we used when we created the budget. Next one. This is a graph of our expenditures. It shows that our public safety is about 50% of our expenditure budget. General government is 15%. Public works 26%, and then the other departments make up the rest. Revenue summary, the largest increase we have is in property taxes. Of the total $237,000 increase, $204,000 is coming from taxes. Okay. Property taxes make up 63% of our total revenues. The second is intergovernmental revenues at 22%. And I'm gonna hand it off. You can sit right there.
I think I'm loud enough. I'm not. Let me know. So I put together just a quick summary of the all other funds. So we have 18 other funds in addition to the general fund. So the general categories, we have the debt service, the special revenue funds, of which there's 10. And then we have 4 capital projects funds, and then 3 enterprise funds, which are utilities. So here's the debt service fund. It's similar to the prior year budget. It's 3.1 million in revenues and then 3.2 million in expenditures. Not a huge change there. Do you have anything to add on debt service? I guess
So the
borrowing.
fund balance that you see at the bottom, those are our premiums. So when we issued debt last year, we were given huge premiums, which we had to keep in our debt service fund and use for interest payments for the future debt. So that's why there is a large fund balance, yeah. The 2024 plan is, it's because we didn't put in there our new debt, new payments for the debt that we'll be issuing. So that one's kind of a fluke, so don't pay attention to that one. The 2023 is where it needs to be with the $35,000 fund balance left at year end to pay for interest payments in 2024.
All right, then we have our outstanding debt by type. So as of the end of this year, we'll have about 21 million in general obligation debt. 3 million of that is funded by the utilities, and then the rest is funded by general.
That includes the 8.1 million that's being
Yep.
approved tonight with Interim.
And then revenue bonds, we have 22.7 million out there yet, and then the capital leases drop off this year. So there will be none outstanding at the end of the year. And then there's a table to the right on the debt outstanding versus the state limit, which Christina touched on. So as of the end of this year, with the additional borrowing we'll be doing, we'll be at 30% of our limit. And then we're projecting as of 2022, which includes the building debt.
The
Right.
balance of the building, so
Yes.
around 8.1 this year, another $7 million next year. So that will be our full all-in debt for the building, which is a total of 28 million.
Yes, and that'll put us closer to 40% of our debt limit. All right, so there's a lot on this slide, but this is all the special revenue funds, all 10 of them. Nothing really changed from these since the last time you saw them.
We did get new information on the Aquatic
Yeah.
Center. You wanna talk about that?
Yeah, I can. So we found out that our contract with the Y, the increase for next year is more than what we have in there for the expenditures. But that change that we were thinking would also increase the revenues as well. So we decided to leave it as is because it probably wouldn't make a huge difference. And I believe what the Y was doing would be for like a season exactly like this year, which is kind of a toss-up depending on weather and whatnot, if you were actually open the same quantity of days.
So what happened was the Y contacted us and said they forgot to bill us like $9,000.
Yeah.
Just over between $8,000 and $9,000. They missed a payroll. So when we prepared the budget for the Aquatic Center, we assumed for expenditure purposes it was the same type of year. So normally we would have included that $9,000 when we budgeted this year. But we're not too concerned because when we budget our revenues, we didn't increase the revenues for a type of year that we had this year. So we always budget our revenues low. But we always budget our expenditures high. So knowing that we budget low on revenues, high on expenditures, I believe that $8,000 difference will be okay, because I think we'll have enough revenues. If we really do have the type of year that we had this year, the revenues are gonna be beyond what's budgeted. So we should be able to cover that additional $9,000 if we have an exceptional year like we had this year. That being said, it is the option here that if the committee feels we should present different numbers to the board, we can do that yet. Like this budget is not final. This budget still can change. What we have to present at this meeting is what was published. So when we have people from the community that come in, they need to be able to see what's being presented matches what was published. So any thoughts on amending or changing the Aquatic Center budget that should be adopted tonight?
Any concerns or suggestions? Oh, yes.
So just to add to the conversation, Parks and Rec Committee has decided that they want to discuss price changes for the Aquatic Center for 2022. So at our next meeting next week, we'll actually be discussing price changes, which obviously will affect the revenue side of the Aquatic Center. We haven't changed prices since 2014. Just some of the brief information I've been working on, put together, like if based on this year's revenue that we collected for daily entrance, if for say we would increase the daily price by $1, that would increase our revenue just on that line item by approximately $23,000. So, like Jessica and Jenna both said, they didn't, I don't know if they took that into consideration when they're talking about our increased revenues for next year, but just that alone, you know, even if we don't have as a tremendous year as we did this year, should cover the additional expenditure that we would have based on our contracted services. But we're also looking at season pass prices, some lesson prices, so we're looking at pretty much everything out there. So,
Yeah, because I would be cautious of thinking, because this past year was so great, that next summer is gonna be the same, because Wisconsin is so, you know, weather-wise, we never know what's coming.
So
How much rain is what we got sometimes.
what would we be comparable to Rothschild or Wausau?
so because we're a different facility, we don't really compare ourselves with Wausau. I mean, our facility is completely different than any other three. They charge $2 a person to get in. Right now, our prices are almost identical with Rothschild Schofield. When we set up the joint season pass in 2014 with them, we tried to pretty much non-compete, so almost all of our prices are at the same level. There's a couple little differences, like senior citizens, they don't charge for. They have a couple days where they have a reduced pass or reduced daily entrance fee, but all the season pass prices are the same as we have. I also have talked to Rapids, Marshfield, Merrill. You know, Wisconsin Rapids and Marshfield are brand new facilities. Wisconsin Rapids opened in 2020. Marshfield opened in July of 21. Merrill is probably I think they opened around 2015 or 16. Their prices are almost identical to ours. But Wisconsin Rapids daily entrance right now is $7. We're at $4. Marshfield is trying to set their rates. Their board is really hesitant to even charge $5 a day per person. And they're doing non-resident residents, and they just spent $8 million building that facility that just opened. So I know their staff, based on my discussion with them, is struggling because they're like, you know, how are we gonna at least cover our operating expenses for the future? And their pass prices, they're looking at setting them lower than what ours currently are, based on my discussion with them last week. So
Right, if we do an increase, are we gonna let Rothschild and Schofield know?
I've already.
They could do the same thing?
Yep, I've already talked with Rothschild, and basically they told us that we should do our review, set our prices, and then they will make a determination if they're gonna adjust them. But their commission is on the same as our committee, stating that they definitely need to look at prices.
And the age of their trying, I think with last meeting, we had some discussions and approvals for refurbishing our structure. Are they in a similar?
Rothschild's pretty much in the same mode as we are. They don't quite have the availability for some of the large projects. But I did talk to their operator, which is Rick Stoviak, also last week. And you know, they redid their slides last year, and that was like a $70,000 or $80,000 project. They're looking at doing the interior of the pool surface. So pretty much following along the same lines of the things that we're redoing. They want to replace all their safety pads, their log slices. That's all stuff that we've done. And their facility is only a year older than ours. But so they are in the same lines. They are in the process of looking for new management for their facility. I got official notification that their manager has resigned. So they are looking for management options for their facility for the future.
Where did that person go? Just something different?
Just retired.
Okay.
It was a retired individual pretty much, so.
Any questions or?
The only other thing on the special revenue funds for the grants fund, we have that money for the ARPA grant in there as revenues, but we have to work with our auditor to find out when we're allowed to count that as revenue. So you may see that go out of that line into more of like a balance sheet line. If it's determined that we need to report that as like unearned because we haven't spent it yet with how grants work. But we just talked to Christina before the meeting, and that's something they're working to determine as well, when things should be recognized. But just a heads up, if something gets brought back and we talk about changing that, just so you're aware. So capital projects, we have the TIF 1 capital projects fund. And next year, there's funds budgeted for the Zinzer project, the Weston Ave, the Community Center Drive, and the Stone Ridge. And it ends up being 1.6 million-ish in expenses for TIF capital. And then the other capital improvements funds we have are for the facilities, the streets, and the equipment. And those right now, we have some of the funds in there budgeted for the, I think that's for the borrowing, right? I think the building's the only
The
thing that's
building is
in
the
there.
only thing that's really in.
As we finalize a capital improvement plan, we'll probably be looking at amending that at that point. But for now, there's not a whole lot going on in the capital improvement funds. I don't know. Anything to add? And then just a summary on the utility funds. So you have the water, sewer, and the storm. The decrease in the sewer, I believe that was due to the Red Mountain Metro coming back and saying that their fees were not going to be as high as we anticipated. And I think they ended up being lower. than what they were this year. Yeah, so that's what that decrease is there in the sewer fund. I don't, Michael, do you have anything you want to point out on the utilities, or? We've kind of talked about everything in depth, so we're kind of just summarizing, but if anyone has questions.
I think we budgeted all of them with a status quo for the rates, but
Yeah,
we need to definitely, that's something we're gonna be looking at for the water utility. We wanna look at, what is that?
Simplified rate case.
Simplified rate. Which would allow us to, without a huge process, get it rate increase approved for the water utility. We do that because of the upcoming projects, just additional maintenance and keeping up our water utility. For the stormwater utility, we are waiting on a project that's being done with the stormwater utility, looking to see what kind of rates that the firm would be recommending to increase so we can maintain what we have, make the improvements that we need to, and also fund our future debts. So that's something that we're waiting on, the results on that before we bring back any proposed increases for next year.
Yeah, I guess the study Jessica's referring to is we had hired Strand Associates to look at the stormwater, I guess the stormwater in general, just due to the DNR's, new regulations with the phosphorus loadings for the Wisconsin River. So they're reviewing, I guess, where we stand with as far as how well we meet DNR requirements, and then moving forward, what we're going to be required to do to keep improving the treatment of stormwater before it enters the drainage ways of the village. So there will be some projects and benchmarks that we'll have to hit to show the DNR that we're making progress on improving our waterways.
So I guess, and referring back to the audit or the presentation from Kerber Rose here. I mean, I think she was pointing to the fact that we should probably focus on rate of return for both our utilities rather than simply our net income every year, because I know we are, and we were hamstrung a bit. I know we couldn't raise our water utility rates because of the stepped increase that we had approved in 2018. We had to wait a year before we could file simplified rate increase request, but I know on the sewer side, we also are falling behind on what was recommended by our study a couple of years ago to kind of focus on a rate of return there as well. So I think we also need to take a look at that.
What's the timeframe
For
looking, checking into it or determining?
well, sewer utility, we have no restrictions necessarily, I guess, it's something they're looking at. And I think in our budget, we're probably, again, as Jessica said, we tend to be somewhat conservative on what our revenues are gonna be and a little bit more, I don't know,
Generous with our expenses.
overestimating expenses, so we end up with these budgets that show a projected deficit, yet we end up with a small surplus come year end, but I know we didn't wanna fall behind on rate increases over time to avoid the rate shock deal, so I think we need to just see what we feel would be an appropriate bump this year. I know there were some recommendations going forward from the prior study, so I think we need to look at that as staff and see what would be.
Is that something we
recommended.
expect to do first quarter?
I would think
January.
first quarter would be
Yeah.
the time to do it, yeah.
So in summary, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. So, that's where we're at. And then, in summary, the 2022 budget is complete. We already know the challenges that we face for 2023. The sooner we start and take the time to prioritize, the more confident we will be that the 2023 budget will meet the needs of the community. So, we had really good discussions during our joint meetings this year, I think, with the communication of, hey, we got issues coming up. As a reminder, $111,000 of that revenue increase that we had this year, we can't repeat. We can't repeat it under the current state regulations. With inflation at 6%, I can't see how the state can't change something. I mean, governments are not going to be able to survive with the increase in cost and being limited at a 0.5% increase in revenue, so.
Okay. Is that,
If I may, just to kind of piggyback on this second to last slide, the summary, of course, this ties in with the desire for the board to do some strategic planning. And if we're gonna do some of that before budget time, it's probably a high priority. I'm not sure we can do a full strategic plan update by, say, June of next year, but, we certainly want to identify what our budget priorities would be, and that would be part of the process, I would think. So that'll have to be a focus that I need to get in front of the board, kind of following through all the things we talked about in my review.
now what are we doing as far as planning for the money that we're getting from the government? I mean, are we doing anything, looking at what can we do, like water treatment type thing that we know we should have done, but there's no way we can afford it? What are you are you looking at anything?
Well, I know the board had asked for what, some of those eligible activities were. And of course, water and wastewater projects were one of those things that have been identified. We had not said that, I guess we've heard that there is some desire to allocate part of that money towards one-time expenditures and
Right.
public safety. We could use some of that and some one-time expenses saved for some outside consultant help on some of these efforts like strategic planning or organizational studies or things of that nature too. Things that we probably wouldn't be able to do or wouldn't do with, because we don't necessarily have the resources on our own to do those kind of things.
Well, I just, I was thinking, I understand we can raise the rates of the utilities without having, to go through the government other than public, we just can't raise them without having input from the government, I guess. But I just look at, the complaints and everything that we have about the utilities, water, and how difficult it is on water heaters and whatnot all, and I just think this might be an opportunity to, do something without having to affect the rates or the taxes or whatever.
Sure.
I just think that that's a type of project, it's a big project, but it wouldn't benefit me because I'm on my own system, but it will benefit the majority
Yeah,
of the people, you know.
well, it would minimize the rate impact, or I should say, reduce some of the rate impact of some of those projects. I think the projects have been pretty well laid out or identified in our water and sewer system master plans, for sure.
Well, that was just a thought for me was, that we don't just do some of these, not that we can't do some of these little things or a wish list. I hope what we do is what we need, not what we want. Yes,
I agree with you to a certain degree, but I think it has to be, I guess, village-wide, and I don't know what the percentages of people that are on the sewer and water or not, and I guess I get the feelings, just as she kind of mentioned today, as far as being below the normal rates or return on investments. There seems to be a lot of room for paying for some of this through the increase in rates, and I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be, but I think we have to look at other different projects. My understanding is they still only have the interim rules out there.
Yes, they do, and we got an email today that they are looking to see if they can broaden the uses even more.
Well, so your question on how we're gonna spend it, if I can talk, I mean, in finance, it'd be just maybe nice to have once a month, what are the current options? Because it just seems like they just keep expanding,
well, yeah, that's,
and then to dovetail back on the water. I know, I've said this before, and I know people don't agree with this, but, our standard of water is drinking, safe drinking water, but yet what percentage is for drinking versus toilet, all things that really isn't necessary. So when I hear about people's water heaters, I've replaced one in 17 years. So I don't know if that's normal. I guess I don't, Hussein talks about a restaurant, maybe it's the use, but would it maybe be more helpful if they treated their own water? If they're gonna have it more often, what?
I guess the one interesting thing there, like, you live nearest probably one of our best water quality wells. So that's kind of the difference.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. So,
And he's talking about the restaurant, is that one of our worst wells?
yeah, correct.
Okay.
So part of that is trying to balance, the water quality throughout the whole system, we have.
So we're hearing that from residents along with businesses.
Correct, yeah, and we had
talk
several
to Gary
residents.
Gearing,
What?
talk to Gary.
And I have heard Gary too, yeah,
I
okay.
mean, he does that. I mean, my son had I don't know, his water heater was very old at all. And it just got
Okay.
dumped up with our water.
All right, I guess that makes more sense.
I'm on my, but is he on Culligan? Does he have Culligan man or whoever does the treatment?
I have nothing on mine, and one since 18 years, actually. I just wonder.
Yeah.
Where, I've had this talk, and I know, Lauren was at the deal too, and I made that comment that, it's for safe drinking water, yet, I don't know, what, 80% isn't drank? It's on the lawn, it's washing the cars, it's doing this. I mean, my God, would it be better if we just brought in semis of drinking water and dispersed it to everybody? I don't know, I mean, I don't know, when I think of this stuff and the millions and millions and millions of dollars and chemicals being used, I guess, Anyway, that's enough of that. But the options once a month, that'd be probably nice, or maybe just an update. Now I'm back on the ARPA money.
On the board agenda,
Okay, oh, yes, okay,
we do.
okay.
Yeah, well, I just was questioning whether staff was, because there is some big projects out there that,
Well,
the people have.
but now with these new passes, with more money, is there gonna be more money coming? I mean, if you counted to $1 trillion, do you know how long it would take you to count to $1 trillion?
You told us that one.
36,000 years, if you went 1 second a point. And what have we done? Almost $10 trillion so far?
Well,
I don't know if they have enough ink for
Mine,
that much
to be honest
money.
with you.
I think that could also impact how we decide to spend the ARPA funds, because if we get the infrastructure funds, if we can put that towards like utility projects, then maybe the ARPA funds, we would want to target
Well, so the ARPA was, how much does anybody know the ARPA fund
the whole
balance?
package.
Whole package? Anybody know what that was?
Oh, I can't remember. I read it.
Versus these last two,
Well, the other thing that you have to remember is that the infrastructure stuff isn't even planned until 2024.
True.
Okay,
So and if we have to make our decision on the ARPA stuff before that,
which we probably do.
that's gonna make a big difference. The other thing that we have to also remember is that my understanding is that it's coming to the state and then the state is going to be pushing. So that makes a whole different scenario also for
The
us
state's pushing on the communities
on the
or
community.
where they're gonna spend.
Where,
Part of like that broadband thing that the standard.
Well, broadband, I mean, we just got $15 million dispersed across the state for tourism. And our local CDB got 345,000. You know, 6 or 7 communities got $1 million.
right, but when you're looking at like the broadband thing,
Uh-huh.
the reality is it's a question of what is considered rural
Mhm.
and so on. My understanding is Wausau is still considered rural.
Well,
So therefore, when they say, well, we're going to put more money into rural broadband, increasing it into this metro area is one thing, but actually getting it to the people that really don't have it is a whole nother dollar value that we have no idea about, and they have no idea about.
$19 million in the county,
how much?
19 million.
19 million, that every spot is covered.
Well, it's 2 years old already, the plan was built. I have to be on the county board when that was developed. It's building towers, getting mainly spread out to the areas that aren't covered by larger metro.
Right.
Cities and villages where the customers, the suppliers don't have a customer base and therefore they can't get return on investment.
Right.
Well, even as far as farther out in Ringgold, they have
Right.
terrible.
Right.
If you
Well,
could even count it. So I mean,
Between driving to Antigo for 20 years, basically, the reality is I get to the eastern part of Marathon County and you don't have cell service.
On 64?
No,
Or where?
on Z
Oh,
and
okay, yeah.
all of those.
They're on
areas.
29 and then 45. is
Yeah,
fine.
your main thoroughfares you do, but
Right,
when you get
64
to
doesn't
those
seem
areas
good.
out there, and as with the whole issue with COVID and all that stuff, and the reality of school children having access and all of that stuff, that's where they found out that, oh, well, yeah, we have coverage, but we really don't have coverage. We have coverage for the main thoroughfares because everybody's on their cell phone and so on. But like you said, the regular providers can't turn around and provide a service to those areas because they have no return on investment. And that goes back to the same thing that was in the 40s when they turned around and they created the rural electric and rural telephone. The government basically had to provide that stuff with monies to those companies to make sure that they provided the services to those areas. Otherwise, it never would have gotten any of that type of utility at that point.
'cause I mean,
It's like the
even
REA
town-
and the Tennessee Valley Authority and all those other utility projects.
Yeah, like the town of Texas, I mean,
Yeah.
there's areas out
Right.
there that my niece, when she wants to get something, sometimes she drives out onto a road somewhere to make a call.
Well, you know,
It's just dumb.
I'm 71 years old, but the reality is when I was a kid in northwestern Marathon County, at that time, in 1954, some of the farmers were first getting electricity. 1954.
Okay, now that's funny.
Well, I got an aunt and uncle, and this is the last story I'm gonna say. In Strasburg, North Dakota, they raised 10 kids, two boys and 8 girls. And I never could understand their toilet, because they always outside toilet, but 2. Because if more than one had to go, you would have to be next to a sibling or a family member. And they did not get running water until the 70s out there. I mean, that's just the way they are. An incredibly clean farm, but I just couldn't believe it.
But again,
So the nicest family you could ever meet.
and actually they had Marathon County Historical Society had a display 2 years ago regarding the rural electric and all of that went into Marathon County and the different areas that they didn't have service for such a long time. And that goes back to the same thing as what we're talking about today with the, you know, the millions of dollars, when you turn around $19 million, it sounds like a lot. But it's the towers, and even though the towers are there, somebody has to turn around and have the lines that get to the towers. And all of that is extremely expensive when you turn around, you're plowing lines in and all of that stuff. So it sounds like a lot of money, but when you're turning around and you're saying, well, it's $250,000 or a mile or whatever it is to get some of that stuff in there, it doesn't go very far.
Plus, it's the largest county in the state.
Yeah,
But you also think of what kind of return would that be? So that people could live rurally and still have, you know,
Well, and-
connectivity.
and-
You might get a lot of growth or a lot of stuff going on too.
well, but, you know, we talk about all of the things that happened during this last 2-year period. And one of the issues was in New York and some of those larger communities when they said, well, the people decided they didn't want to go back to work. They wanted to work from home, and their movement out of into the rural areas was all dependent on the access, phone and internet access. Now, that means that, okay, our rural areas here and including the Weston as such, by having the services that we have, provides a growth thing that we wouldn't normally have. And that's dependent upon the internet and cell service. And that would make a big difference for us as a municipality.
I agree.
So, you know, whether those are potential services or things that we push for, whether it be our representative to the county board or whatever it may be, those are the things that we're going to have to look at and hope that we can, when we look at the strategic planning, we have to look at that. And, okay, so we have this ARPA funds now, what can we do to have an impact? And the next grouping, how that's going to have an effect upon our growth. Big deal.
Well, yeah, because I mean, just our industrial park, we had one heck of a time just
Trying to
high speed.
get service to that, which
Yeah.
made such a big difference. And it's only gonna be more so, right?
Right, you know, so
So
it's not
you know,
just,
TDS coming in, and I wasn't a real fan of that. I am hugely glad we did that. But I mean, Charter right now is coming at me at half price. No obligations, no nothing. So the residents have definitely gained on that 250,000.
that's.
Now, we need to just help TDS get to 60% so we can get our 50 grand a year back for however many, 5 years, I think. Anyway, so I didn't feel right about helping private, but boy, it sure did some
Well,
wild
as
things.
long as we get it back, I didn't, if
Right.
there was a way of getting it back, but okay. I think we digressed off of what we were doing, but anyway,
So at this point, I'd like to recommend the village board approve the resolution
Well,
21.
we're at 8 yet.
You already need it yet?
Sorry,
Sorry.
yeah, we just finished the 2022 budget, and we're,
the presentation.
Okay, move to acknowledge.
here, do you wanna?
We don't need to do anything there, it's at.
Okay.
Okay,
Can you put that on the internet? I mean, is that on our webpage?
okay, policy issues, discussion.
Presentation?
Yes.
No, but I can.
But isn't it being filmed right now?
I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's a video.
Budget?
There's a video right now.
Right, but what I'm saying is that if somebody wanted to look at that and have a clear understanding of what her presentation was to us just now, it just might be helpful
It'd be good.
above
Yeah.
and beyond what.
Yeah. Like, the only downside was somebody might try to hire them. So maybe we don't want it on there. I just don't want anybody trying to grab them.
No.
You know,
Okay, they could do
just
it
put on,
anonymously.
you know,
Anonymously.
put by Maloney or, you know, and then when they meet me, they'll go, no way, you know? There's no way he did that. Anyway,
Okay, now, item 8, interim financing for municipal center banknote.
So I have this on the agenda because I really wanna reach out to you guys and see your thoughts. Interest rates are going up. Do we need to really act on seeing if we can secure a portion of our building on a 20-year bond ASAP?
yes.
I've been concerned about that from,
Mhm.
Okay, so
Well
what
done.
we're gonna do is start working with Greg from Ellers. And then we're gonna work with Corals and then work with our engineer, making sure that we get the amount of money that is for, that will qualify for a 20-year bond issued hopefully beginning of next year.
Yes.
So that is what we'll start working on. We'll let you know, probably, I don't know how far we're gonna get before December, but
You still need to have the interim financing.
so I have the interim financing. We need the 8.1 that we're approving tonight.
Right.
But if I start moving forward and trying to get a 20-year bond, say adopted or approved January, February, I may or may not need to get a second interim.
Right.
Right now,
Right.
we're getting an 8.1 interim and we need a 7.1 or 7 million interim next year. But if we say we need to lock in a 20-year bond, beginning of next year, we're gonna work with our finance and with our legal and see if we can pull out all the expenditures that qualify for a 20-year bond and get that locked in beginning of the year.
Because I mean, that when we were doing this building planning and whatnot all,
I know,
one of the things we talked about so much was how the financing, the interest rates were so low, we needed to do this. And then it just seemed like all of a sudden we just kind of
yes,
slowed way down and then I've been reading about, these rates and I'm going, oh,
Yeah.
that's not a good thing for us, but to try to explain it to the residents again that,
yeah,
So do you think the bond is gonna be, I mean, what dollar amount do you think the bond's
I have
gonna
no
be?
idea.
8 or 10?
I would think.
it's public works, whatever is.
Thought we had a breakdown on that. It was I thought it was in the 11 or 12 million range.
Okay.
The problem though, it can include any equipment, so
Right.
we have a lot of equipment in our public works garage, which have to be pulled out of the.
Correct. But the intercities commitment, financing commitment allowed,
We could use that for anything.
right, but yes, but you're able, if you get your bond in February, let's just say you're going, and it comes to 11 million, you could pay some of your bond off or some of your financing off.
Yep.
Because they have multiple advances, right?
Yeah, it's, well, not multiple advances, we're getting $8.1 million.
Right.
We're gonna need that before the end of December.
But will they allow you to re-advance against that? I mean, what I'm saying is you get,
I'm gonna be paying it off. If we can
Okay.
borrow in January, late January, early February, $11 million, I'm gonna pay off as much as I can, as much as I need to
Okay.
make sure that the total borrowing at the end of February or whenever that time is no more than the amount of the bill.
right, okay.
Right. So that in theory, you're, whatever, if it's 12 million, you have the 9, you gotta turn around and pull it back down so that you have a net of 15 that's gonna be out there is what it amounts to.
Right. So it's just gonna be a wait and see.
Right. Wait and see as to what qualifies for the 20-year.
I don't know about anybody else, but I definitely would encourage to get out there and stuff.
Yeah, it's,
So you want to recommend that or
No,
what?
I'll just take the
Okay.
information back. We'll just start emailing Greg and getting that moving.
Okay,
Okay.
then maybe just recommend the interim financing right now or what to?
No, that's resolution 11, so I think we're on 9.
Oh, okay,
Okay.
okay.
so we have to.
We're on, yeah, we're on 8 now. Now we can go to 9 for resolution number 2021-028. Set to the levy limits for charges for safer pursuant to 20005 Wisconsin Act 484.
So this is going to be a tool that we can use down the road is what you're
So
basically
this
saying.
resolution needs to be approved by both boards, both the town of Red Mountain and the village of Weston, which will allow us to place a dollar amount on a line, a special line on the levy limit worksheet to exceed the statute approved.
Shouldn't we know the dollar amount though? Like,
No, that'll be adjusted each year on the levy limit, that worksheet that she has. So this will allow them to put this on the line so that each year they do the calculation so that won't affect, or that amount won't affect what our limit is what it amounts to. Or allows us to go over that limit for this stuff.
So our levy limit is a certain dollar amount. What you're looking for here is to exceed that dollar amount.
This is based on the public safety,
Right.
eligible expenditures
but shouldn't-
in the safer, it's in that, it's actually in
Right.
EMS.
Right.
That allow that.
I understand that.
Exceed that.
I understand that the state allows us to do that, but don't we need the specific dollar amount?
It varies, but yeah, I don't think it's a percentage.
So
I think you guys had a.
Not for the resolution, we don't, but it will get approved as part of, like, as you're approving the budget. So our current tax levy that's in there, we included increasing an extra 70,000 approximately for this year for safer. So this year, the impact, which is already included in the estimated tax rate, is 70,000. So safer going up, we're going to increase our levy by 70,000 above like where the levy limits would put us to cover safer expenses this year.
So it's already in the budget. This resolution just verifies that the state verifies that the municipalities agree that we need to finance the joint fire district.
Mhm.
But through your resolution for the budget approval is where you actually approve the levy rate.
I'm just afraid that it's gonna get lost in there. I'm just saying that, there's something in my mind that's not real clear here as far as, did we do this last year? I don't remember that.
Was it available?
We didn't do it last year because we didn't qualify. We have to make sure that the increase in safer has to meet a threshold, and it didn't meet that threshold last year. So we didn't bring the resolution forward.
Now, this resolution would be for multiple years, my assumption. Or not,
It might be having to be done every year.
every year? Because I didn't necessarily see that, but I don't know the rules on that.
Well, the thing is, if we don't wanna raise the tax rate that much and we say, no, you gotta cut,
Something else.
right?
But shouldn't we be looking at that then? I'm just saying that,
Well,
the
this
chief just came in here and we're 6 cops short and the police force, and I understand that safer and police force is necessary, but I'm just curious on why we're not looking at where else we should have funding except for increasing.
Well, this is part of that funding. This is giving us that funding. If
Well,
we didn't have this, we would have to be cutting $70,000 from our budget.
right, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying, is maybe we should be looking at that.
This is only available for fire departments.
This is only available for safer at that point. This is not available for the police department.
I understand, but I'm saying we have other challenges that Jessica's talked about, last month and the month before regarding the budget. And I'm at a loss of why we would want to do that without looking at what we're providing as other services. I think there should be consideration given
If
to,
you don't want to approve this resolution, you have to tell Safer to cut their budget by $70,000. This budget allows Safer to increase the proposed budget the way it was presented. If we don't do that, Safer cannot, because we don't have any other funds to fund it. And this was presented before. We presented the budget assuming that the state would allow us to use this line to raise the levy above what the state statutes allow to pay for the joint fire district. There is nothing that the state will allow us to do for police. This is a special line.
I understand that they're different, but I mean, you brought it up that we had these challenges before. I just didn't, at the time, I guess I didn't realize that we were looking at going above what that level, the state level was. And I understand this is a vehicle or
The
a,
state only
procedure.
allows us to increase their rate $40,000. So
Right.
this allows for an additional 70. And the resolution that we have is basically taken from the state. And the state has these sample resolutions out there.
I mean, for years, we've been talking about why isn't there any kind of a break for municipalities that have joint
services.
joint services, and we've been looking for it and fighting for it, and we finally are eligible for it. You know, and like Jessica has said, we've got some major challenges, and some of it is because Safer and Metro, we've got to figure out how we can keep those two departments going and the general fund going also. Well, now we have a little bit that we can raise. I'm not happy about having to raise taxes any more than anybody else, but we are able now to get a break on having a joint fire department. I mean, if you could say break in that, we are able to raise our limit to help cover some of those expenses that we have been struggling with to cover. I mean, because of the levy limits, we would get their budgets and we would just be going, well, now what? You know? Because they're independent departments because they're joint, it's.
No, I understand, Barbara, I'm
not sure what you're asking.
yeah.
I can provide you lots of information, but you've got to.
And maybe we should have that conversation, because I just. I
can show you the levy limit worksheet when I prepare it. I mean, what the board will approve will be a total levy. And when I prepare this worksheet, I have to put $1 amount here, $1 amount here, one up here, and it all is going to equal what's approved. It just depends what line on this worksheet I put in. And this will allow me to use this middle line.
With that, I recommend the board approve the resolution 2021-2028 authorizing exception to the levy limits charge for the safer pursuant to the 2005 Wisconsin Act 484.
Motion by Bob, second? Do I have a second? Then I will second it. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I,
Opposed? So carried. Okay. Resolution number 10, resolution 2021-029, 2022 general fund operating budget, and resolution 2021-030, 2022 all other fund budget. What's your pleasure?
Also recommended.
Do I have a second? Do I have a second? I will second it. On the question? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Number 11, resolution 2021-032, 2021A debt issue. What's your pleasure?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
By Minell,
I'll second it.
second by Bender. On the question, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Future items, next meeting date, Monday, December 20th at 4:30. Anybody know ahead of time if they got a problem?
Unknown.
You know, topics for future meetings, vendor addition procedure checklist. Budget amendment. Did you want to talk about these as we go through them or just, okay. Budget amendment, capital improvement plan, direct payments, referendum discussion. Remarks from staff. Anything? Okay. Remarks from committee members. Bob?
Nothing,
Okay. Steve?
nothing to add.
And I have nothing other than to say again, good job. Announcements? Okay, then I'll have a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll second.
Second by Nell. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, not opposed. So we will adjourn at 5:56. Thank you. Were you up north again, or are you home?
I've been home.
Okay.